Salem has made her move, and the siege of Atlas has begun, bringing with it the horrors of war that the people of this age do not yet know. War not only against the Grimm that has been fought for centuries, but a war against their very own emotions. And with that being said, I will say spoiler warnings for those who have not seen episode 7 of RWBY Volume 8 just yet. I will not be showing the episode or any clips from it in this video, simply images of the episode and analyzing the events that take place. I will leave a link in the description below so you guys can go to Rooster Teeth first, watch the episode there, and support the series that we all love. Now, this episode does start off with the siege of Atlas. Salem's Grimm whale has made landfall and spewed a bunch of Grimm liquid over the ground, spawning a Grimm army. And the armies of Atlas are standing strong, ready to meet them. Though admittedly, they're shaking in their boots, considering they are facing down an army the size of which they've likely never seen or even heard of before. But with a number of Atlesian paladins on their side, numerous soldiers, and the airships on top of that, they can put up a pretty decent fight. Though Salem's Grimm whale continues to spawn more and more Grimm, more than they will be able to deal with. But there is no place for them to flee, so they have to stand their ground and fight against them. But with Grimm spawning as fast as sabers, as strong as the Megalithics, and as terrifying as the Apathy, it's going to be a difficult fight for anyone to win. If the sabers lead the charge, taking the fire from the opposing army, the Megalithics following, able to trample anything in their wake, and the Apathy being able to completely destroy the opposing army's morale, well, I don't really see a way for them to be able to win without some major backup. Last episode, we did have the call going out to the rest of Remnant, and we'll see if anyone has enough time to even respond. I have a feeling there's not going to be much backup coming until after the battle is already over, and they're going to be more of a recovery operation, but yeah, things are not looking good, and Ironwood seems to agree with that. He's very frustrated when we see him, and he gives the order to his army to evacuate all of the civilians in Atlas to the subway, which of course sends everyone into a panic. As Ironwood's message goes out and Grimm start flying throughout the city, everyone begins to flee for their lives, trying to save themselves and their families, which honestly makes sense considering that most of these people likely have never seen Grimm before, only in either books or other media, not in person, as they've been safe within the hard light dust shields of Atlas. But now that it's come to face them in reality, they are confronted with their own fear and what they will do under this panic. I'm honestly getting a very Lord of the Rings vibe from this episode, with the way that both armies were facing off against one another being very reminiscent of the battle for Minas Tirith in The Return of the King. And also, as the army breaks into the city, everyone is told to flee for their lives, with the Mad Ruler being in charge, both in the Lord of the Rings movie and in this case with Ironwood as well, so yeah, the parallels are definitely there. But after that, we see Winter, the rest of the Aesops, with Jean, Yang, and Ren held prisoner in handcuffs, returning to the city. And we hear over the radio comms that the hard light dust shields are too damaged to repair, so Ironwood says, don't waste resources on it, move that to elsewhere, which honestly, it doesn't even make sense why they're trying to repair it, as we saw in the end of last episode that 2 of the generators fell from Atlas, so there would be no way, unless they had replacement generators, to get the hard light dust barrier back up and running. Not that it would do much good anyways, because there's already a giant Grimm whale that's spawning countless numbers of other Grimm within the area that the hard light dust barrier covers, so getting that back up and running is kind of a moot point at this time. But Winter reports to Ironwood that she's returned to Atlas, bringing with her the prisoners, and Ironwood tells her to stay put, wait for future orders, and to not let the prisoners out of her sight. But upon seeing the whale up close for the first time, Jean expresses that that is where Oscar is, to which Vine says Grimm don't take prisoners, and normally that would be true. Even with Salem's control, I think Grimm are a little bit too primal in their instincts to actually respond to her orders, even though she can direct them to certain places here or there. But the thing is, the Grimm do have a master that possesses magic that would be able to instruct the Grimm to do specific things. I don't think Salem would be able to instruct like a Berengal or a Saber to just kidnap someone and not to kill them in the process, but the Hound is certainly special, and yeah, it's certainly within her capabilities, something that the Aesops don't yet realize, but they will, most likely. in the coming episodes, but we'll have to see how that plays out. We do hear what Ironwood's plan is, though. He tells Winter that they are preparing a bomb for the whale. Considering that they can't really damage it from the outside, maybe it will be vulnerable from the inside. So, all that Winter has to do with the rest of the Aesops is stand by until the bomb is ready, it will be delivered to them, and then on foot, they will have to bring it within the whale and have it detonated to take it out. To me, that sounds a lot like a suicide mission. If for them having to deliver it on foot, they would be able to possibly get it within the whale, but are they supposed to be having enough time to get out of the blast range before it goes off? My guess would be probably not, because that entire time, the whale would be spawning more Grimm, the battle would be continuing, and more people would be dying. So the second that the bomb could go off to potentially kill this whale, I think Ironwood might hit that button, even if it meant sacrificing all of the Aesops. So not really a great plan, and Winter is quite shocked with it at the beginning, but eventually decides to follow orders. Yang tells her that you can't do this. All of them, Ren, Yang, and Jean, are concerned about Oscar, but Winter, although she doesn't really want to, seems to be pretty resolved in this plan at the moment. And then within the Grimm whale, we see Salem conducting the battle as she sends out the next wave of Grimm liquid, seeming to enjoy herself while doing so. All the while, Emerald is watching from behind her, and she decides to do something that Salem probably wouldn't look too kindly on. She sneaks away and heads to where Oscar is being interrogated by Hazel, even having to go so far as to use her semblance of hallucinations to mask herself from a seer Grimm along the way, which is a bit interesting considering that Emerald is able to use her hallucination semblance on a Grimm, so she can mask her presence from Grimm as well as humans and Faunus, etc. So, nice little tidbit for Emerald's semblance there. As she listens at the wall, or at the door, to what Oscar and Hazel are saying, at this point it's Ozpin talking to Hazel, asking him, "Why do you think Salem chose you?" To which, of course, Hazel responds, "Because we want the same thing. They share a vision of a new world without kingdoms and the Huntsman Academies," which is a bit counterintuitive considering that the Huntsman Academies are really only necessary because of the Grimm that Salem controls, but more to the point, Hazel just wants a world without Ozpin. Ozpin has an easy counter to this, though, saying if Salem does get all of the 4 relics together, there's simply going to be no world left, let alone a new world afterwards. Salem has been alive longer than you can comprehend, and at this point, all she wants is a release from that. All she wants is her own death, which pisses Hazel off, and he hits Ozpin again, or in this case Oscar, because it's Oscar's body, but Hazel tells him once again that Salem cannot be killed, but he adds on this time that he has tried to do so himself. When Salem first came to him, he tried to kill her over and over again, but every time he could only watch as she pieced herself back together again, giving him no more than a couple hours rest, until the point where he could no longer lift his arms, and then Salem made her proposition that through her he would be able to get the vengeance that he needed. And Ozpin simply says that is exactly why she chose you, because she was able to convince you that that vengeance was what you actually needed. Sure, Ozpin deserves what's coming to him, but Oscar doesn't, the rest of Remnant doesn't. Everything Hazel has done was not for some sense of justice, it was for himself, because he thought it would help. And he asks Hazel one simple question. Has it helped? Which is a very powerful one to ask Hazel in that situation, because he is literally beating the crap out of Ozpin, the person that he hates, the person that he blames for Gretchen's death, and he still seems to be angry, furious. It doesn't seem to be helping him in any way, shape, or form, let alone all of the other atrocities he's committed to get to this point. So being faced with that reality is something that's probably going to shake Hazel a little bit. But before we get to see the results of that question, we cut over to the Schnee Manor, where we see Weiss caring for Nora, who at this point is still unconscious, though she is able to mumble a few words. What am I good for now? Even in this unconscious state, Nora is still in turmoil over determining her own self-worth, seeing the value in the things that she can do. And I really hope that later this volume, after everyone has reunited, she is able to find her own value, see her own worth in both herself and what others see in her as well. I think that Ren is going to be very helpful in this endeavor with what happens later in this episode, but there's also the possibility that things could go very much awry before they're able to reunite. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. Ruby and Blake then enter the room, and all of them are kind of wondering what exactly they should do. More Grimm are being spawned faster than the army can deal with them, and they're eventually going to be overrun. They did get their message out, but are they supposed to just wait and hope that help will arrive? Before they're able to really talk out this conversation, May re-enters the room as well, saying that she was able to get in contact with Fiona, and she says that Jean, Ren, Yang, and Oscar have been MIA for the last little while now, so it's time to head back. Weiss, of course, says they can't leave now, but May makes a very good point. Atlas has an army to defend it, but Mantle only has them. Literally, the Happy Huntresses, Team RWBY, and Team Alpine are the only ones capable of defending Mantle at this point. There weren't any other huntsmen or huntresses that we knew of stationed in Mantle, and Atlas certainly didn't leave them any military personnel to defend the place, so I can only imagine the state that the Mantle crater is in at the moment. That Grimm river that Salem had running across the ground, only a portion of it shot up to Atlas to deactivate the hard light dust barrier. The rest of it is going to continue moving to the lowest point, that being the Mantle crater. And although we didn't see it this episode, we likely will next episode, and it's probably not going to be in the greatest state. Weiss then asks May, though, don't you have family in Atlas? To which May gives a very steadfast reply, saying, Mantle needed me, and to the Marigolds that meant I wasn't their son anymore, and I made sure that everyone knew that I wasn't their daughter. They have Henry, you have Whitley. As she was talking to Weiss, comparing Whitley in Weiss's family to Henry in hers, that no one accepted them. For those who did not know, May is the first transgender character in RWBY. She was the Marigold's son and is now their daughter, but in her mind, she doesn't want anything to do with them anymore, which is completely understandable. We actually met her cousin Henry Marigold back in Volume 4 of RWBY. He was the one who hit on Weiss at that party and didn't really, understand what it was for, or the meaning behind it. So, yeah. Definitely someone who seems to have that elitist mentality, not really understanding or caring about the struggles of those beneath him, so I can easily understand why May doesn't want anything to do with him or the rest of the Marigold family, but with there being hope for Whitley, there might be some hope for Henry and May to have a reunion by the end of this volume, that maybe May will go and try to rescue the rest of her family and be accepted by them, which would be a nice scene to see. And it seems like Weiss kind of realizes that there might be more to it than May might realize, but as she starts to speak up, May kind of turns on her and says, whose side are you on anyways? Which is, of course, exactly what Elm said at the end of Volume 7 that led to the entire fight between the Aesops and Team RWBY, so, yeah, RWBY quickly steps in to defuse the situation, saying, look, there are no sides, it's all of us versus Salem. We need to work together. That's the only way we're going to get through this. And May realizes that she's right, calms down, and asks her simply, what's the plan? We see that Whitley was listening to all of this outside the door, and likely these words did have some effect on him, being compared with the unaccepting nature of the Marigolds, making him realize that maybe the way he's been treating Weiss isn't really a way to convey any positive feelings that he has for her, so we'll see if that plays any effect later on. Before we get to see any more of them, though, we cut back to Hazel and Ozpin, as it seems Hazel has taken the time to listen to Ozpin's tale, as he's essentially reciting the entirety of the lost fable, ending off with the curse that Salem was placed under. For as long as the world turns, you shall walk its face. Saying that Salem wants to divide humanity beyond repair, so that when the relics are united, the gods are resummoned, they will judge humanity poorly, and wipe out all of Remnant, hopefully Salem along with it. Hazel not really buying it though, as considering Ozpin is responsible for Gretchen's death in his mind, he has already resolved himself not to trust anything Ozpin says. So Oscar decides to take over, telling Ozpin to trust him. And the first thing Oscar does when he takes over is tell Hazel exactly what he wants to know. Her name is Jin. Just say her name and you can activate the relic. She has one question left. Hazel gets a little bit angry about that, saying, after all of this, after the torment that I've put you through, all of this, now you give Salem what she wants? But Oscar simply says, no, I'm telling you the password so that hopefully you can use the question and find out for yourself. Emerald hears all of this from the other side of the door and realizes that things aren't exactly what they seem. So she goes immediately over to Mercury and tells him everything that she overheard and says, even with all of this, are you still going to vacuo? Well, that's Salem's new orders, and Mercury knows that there's no beating Salem. The big guy tried to. He tried to kill Salem, and he failed. And so he fell in line. We're just going to do the same because there's no beating her. Besides, Salem doesn't want to destroy the world, he says as he's leaving the room, to which Tyrion replies, oh, of course she does. Why would you guys think anything different? Salem is destruction incarnate. Is there anything more beautiful than seeing the world go up in flames? Of course, both Emerald and Mercury are a bit surprised by this, but then Tyrion puts a happy arm around Mercury and says, come on, Mr. Black, we need to go to Vacuo. And so he drags Mercury over to the ship, puts them inside, and they take off, leaving Emerald on her own. Though not technically on her own, she still has Neo there, and I think Neo and Emerald might be escaping together, especially when Emerald goes to the one other person she might be able to convince to leave Salem alongside her, that being Neo, though we haven't seen Cinder or Neo at all this episode, so maybe Neo is along with Cinder going out to hunt Penny, so we'll see how all that plays out, but I'm pretty sure by this point, by the time that Emerald even decided to go to listen to Oscar and Hazel, she may have already made up her mind to, well, one, disobey Salem, but especially after hearing what Ozpin had to say, she's made up her mind to abandon Salem entirely. The question now remains how she's going to do that, because now she's possibly alone on the whale with Salem? Well, with Hazel and Oscar, so I'm curious to see how all of this is going to play out. Not only does Hazel know the password to the lamp, so does Emerald. So perhaps Emerald might be using that last question. So it'll be interesting to see where all of that leads. It also looks like there was a hint of doubt put in Mercury's mind now that Tyrion has confirmed that Salem is going to destroy the world. He was only helping because there was going to be a spot for him in the new world. And also there was no beating her, but there was some other incentive on top of that. We see as he's about to be shipped away that there's some concern on his face. I would have kind of liked Mercury to be on Salem's side a little bit longer and that seed of doubt not be placed until a little bit later, especially now that I know Mercury and Tyrion are going to be working together. I would have loved to see a fight of them fighting in tandem and then eventually them fighting against each other, but we might not actually get to see them fighting together against other huntsmen and huntresses. Instead, they're just going to try to infiltrate Vacuo. Maybe Mercury will turn traitor at that point, try to mess up the plans, or possibly even alert Shade Academy. Surrendering himself to Professor Theodore, you know, there's a couple different ways that this could play out too, so I'm really looking forward to the second half of Volume 8. At this point, though, we cut back over to the Aesops and their prisoners. Yang is protesting the plan to simply blow up the whale with Oscar still inside, and Jean speaks up, proposing a different offer. You know what? Send us in first as a test run. Myself, Yang, and Ren will go in before you guys, and we'll scout it out. And while we're in there, we'll look for Oscar at the same time, which is a pretty enticing offer, as not only would it help the plan, because the Aesops in winter have no idea what's inside the whale, hordes of Grimm, Salem herself, etc., so having that info beforehand would be very beneficial. And considering they have to wait for the bomb to be prepared anyways, this seems like a win-win all around. If they're able to get Oscar out, great. Otherwise, oh well, then let it go boom. But everyone's kind of surprised at this. Marrow speaks up saying, you'd really go in alone? And Yang says, wouldn't you do that for each other, for Harriet, for Elm? Like, don't you guys want to save each other? And they give the typical response, saying that we don't let our emotions get in the way of making the right call. And Harriet speaks up, saying that if someone on our team dies, if we lose someone, we replace them. Just like Marrow replaced Tortuga, and just like Winter replaced Clover. So we learned who the previous Aesop was before Marrow, and it seems like this was a pretty recent shift, as in Volume 7 they said Marrow was the newest member of the Aesops, so, well, there was a member named Tortuga at one point. I don't know if there's an Aesop's fable that would relate to this. I feel like we'd need to know what Tortuga's last name was, or if Tortuga is his first or last name, not exactly sure, but there might be an Aesop's fable that would relate to that. After Harriet says that, though, Ren speaks up angry. He says that no one is replaceable. You can't just treat people like that, etc. And when he stands up and glares at everyone, this is when his semblance completes its evolution. He's surprised to see that he can see the emotions of individuals now. If he focuses on a single person, he can see what emotion they are feeling in the color of lotus petals. He looks at Harriet and he sees that there are red petals flowing around him, and he can tell that she's lying. She doesn't feel nothing towards the rest of her teammates. She is furious, red with anger that Clover had died. And he looks at the others. Marrow has blue petals, Elm has orangish red petals, and Vine has green petals. He looks at himself and can see pink petals. Each of these petals likely refers to a different emotion. Red with anger, I'm going to guess blue with sorrow. Elm is orange, meaning that it's some combination of red and yellow, maybe. Maybe there's pink in there. Not exactly sure. I'm guessing it's still anger, but maybe less so than Harriet's. And then Vine is green. Now, that could mean a couple of different things in my mind, because green could just be neutral. Vine seems like a pretty neutral person, of kind of a blank slate, almost just taking orders, not really having many of his own emotions. But, you know, there is the saying, green with envy. So I'm not to get too much into shipping category, but with Vine is envious. Maybe he's envious of how Elm felt about Clover, because with the orange petals, those could be a combination of different colors. What if Elm was in love with Clover, but Vine is in love with Elm? And Elm being so upset that Clover died is making Vine envious of how Elm felt about him. Vine wants Elm to feel the same way about him that she does about Clover. And I think this is further backed up by how angry Elm got when Ren starts calling people out on their individual emotions. Ren says, "This is why you lost to Team RWBY. You've been preventing yourselves from working together as a true team by suppressing how you feel about each other." And at that point, Elm rears up to go hit Ren. Winter does step in, but this could further enforce that point. I don't know, not to get too much into shipping category, but this could be a little bit of a love triangle that's going on. I wouldn't be surprised with how angry Harriet is about Clover's death that she might have had feelings for him as well. Like, when you're suppressing emotions that much, things are going to boil over eventually. But after Winter prevents Elm from striking Ren, she agrees with Jean's plan, allowing them to go in first, but tells them that if you aren't out in time, the bomb is going to go off anyways. Harriet disagrees with this plan, but Winter shuts her down right away by simply saying, "I outrank you." To which Harriet's response can be summed up in 3 simple words: angry rabbit noises. Harriet could say nothing to that and was just an angry bunny at that moment. She is outranked and she decided to follow orders, so not really anything they could do. So they land on the battlefield, let out Jean, Yang, and Ren, but before Ren hops out of the plane, he confronts Marrow and calls him out completely on his inner emotions, saying, "I can tell you don't want any part of this anymore." But Marrow says, "I have a job to do, I'm going to do it," and Ren turns to Winter and says, "I can see the same to you as well." And we see the flurry of emotions that is around Winter right now. Blue, red, green, and orange. So green being envy. Not exactly sure if that's the case with Winter or what she could be envious of. Perhaps how close Weiss is with the rest of her friends, the rest of her team, the path that she chose, whereas Winter's on a path that's leading somewhere definitely different, but she is a bundle of emotions, where each of the Aesops seem to be more so a singular emotion. So it's interesting to see how this breaks down, and I'm curious to see how it is going to progress in the future with Ren's semblance, now that it has evolved into something different. And I think I was right in that video I posted a year ago about what was agitating Ren in Atlas. It was the massive amount of negative emotions from everyone in Mantle, from everyone in Atlas, Ironwood, and the negative emotions that he was experiencing from the fall of Beacon Academy. Everything that was all around him, Ren was sensing. And now he has finally come through all of that and reached that clarity. His semblance finally being able to evolve to the point where he can sense individuals' emotions. He can part them out so it's not just one jumbled mess, making him so agitated, irritated. Through all this meditating that he's done throughout the Volume 7 and, well, hasn't really had much time in Volume 8, but he's reached this clarity and his semblance has awakened something new. Now, I'm curious to see if this is something passive that his semblance is always doing, because when we could see what Ren saw, his vision was black and white until he focused on an individual. Then that person appeared in color and he could see the color of the person's emotions around them. So I don't know if that's going to be now a passive semblance. I wouldn't be surprised if every semblance could have passive aspects to it, but, we'll have to see how it progresses in the future of RWBY. And I think it will be helpful when it comes to Nora, where they can be honest with their emotions. As Ren saw with himself, he looked down and saw the pink lotus petals fluttering around him. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the pink flowers indicate that he's in love and that he's thinking of the one he loves, being Nora, that he wants to be with her, and that is who it's important to him. That there is a lot of value that Nora has to him, everyone else around him, and I want to see that reunion, but with them heading into the whale, things could definitely go awry. The last scene we see of the episode is back at the Schnee Manor, where RWBY is saying, why don't we go find Crow and Robin? Maybe they could help with something. But May shuts that down right away, saying, I don't think you understand. This isn't a situation where everyone's going to win. We have to choose either Atlas or Mantle. Crow and Robin aren't going to help us. We have to make the decision. So choose. RWBY, Weiss, and Blake aren't really comfortable with that decision, but before they're able to speak their mind, they hear a knock on the door, which causes all of them to be on alert. They all pull out their weapons, and Weiss goes to answer the door. To which we are happy to see that Klein has returned. I had a feeling they weren't going to write him off the show completely, and he is now returned as a doctor to care for Nora. Weiss is, of course, happy to see him, and the rest of the crowd that is there is a bit confused as to who exactly he is, and Weiss is confused as to who exactly called him. But upon seeing Whitley coming down the stairs, Klein is happy to go and greet him, saying that he was glad to get Whitley's call, and then heads up to go care for Nora. And Weiss is happy to see that her brother is a caring person after all, because Whitley has a bit of a tsundere moment where he says, I didn't do it for you, you know. I half expected him to say baka after that, but still, Weiss responds saying, I know you didn't do it for me, and that's why it means so much. She goes over and hugs her brother, and he hugs her back, which is a really touching moment to see, and I'm so glad to see that Whitley and Weiss are now on better terms, that they've been able to reach some sort of understanding, that Weiss has faith that her brother isn't just a miniature version of her father, and Whitley is seeing that his sister cares about him as well. But as they are embracing, they hear another explosion that shakes the entire mansion. And when they go out to open the door, they see that a crater has been formed in front of the Schnee Manor. And as they run over to see what caused this crater to be formed, they see Penny, as she reaches out towards RWBY and says, I'm sorry, before passing out. And this is where the episode ends, leaving things off for a lot of things to go pretty awry, especially with this last scene of Penny arriving at the Schnee Manor. With how targeted her landing seems to be, I think she would have regained some control while falling, and when she was in the crater, she was obviously still herself to some extent. Very damaged and seemed to be on the verge of dying almost, as she was leaking her blood, which was the green synthetic liquid that was coming out of her at that time. So, hopefully Klein, being a human doctor, can do something to help a synthetic person, being Penny, so hopefully she won't die at this point. In fact, I don't think she's going to die at this point, but I'm hoping that the hacking of Watts doesn't take full control of Penny, at this time, because if she goes on a rampage in the Schnee Manor, that's going to be, well, that's not going to be too great. Either way, though, the Schnee Manor is going to be under siege, because with Penny now there, the Hound is going to be able to track her down very easily. Not to mention, Cinder is also on that trail. I had always had the idea that the Schnee Manor is going to be overrun by Grimm at some point in Volume 8 with Salem's army arriving, and this is going to be the point of Willow's last stand. We haven't really seen her at all in Volume 8, so if the Schnee Manor is overrun, especially with Penny landing on the ground and the Schnee Manor shaking like that, I'm guessing unless Willow is completely inebriated at this point, she's going to feel the shaking of the manor and go out to see what's going on. You know, unlock the door to her room and go talk to her daughter and son. At that point, she'll see what's all happening and hopefully be able to put the bottle down. But if Cinder and the Hound show up, then I think she will definitely put the bottle down to defend her family and give them time to escape. Making her last stand, we will see Willow's summoning and what she is capable of, possibly fighting the Hound alongside Penny, perhaps, as well as everyone else, trying to fight off Cinder and the Hound, and we'll see how exactly that goes. This would also be a good confrontation for the Hound, if it is Summer Rose, to make contact with RWBY and see how that all interaction goes, or if RWBY is able to use her Silver Eyes on the Hound, maybe either destroy the Hound outright, perhaps maybe bring the consciousness of the person that was mutated into the Hound to the surface. There's numerous different ways that just this one plot line in the Schnee Manor could go. Regardless, I think Willow's going to make her final stand and end up dying in the coming episodes. And then, of course, there's Jean, Yang, and Ren heading into the Grimm Whale. What exactly they're going to find, whether they will be the first members of Team Juniper or Team RWBY to come face to face with Salem. They'll likely be able to get Oscar out at some point, whether Oscar is rescued or saved by Hazel or Emerald. Not exactly sure. I have a feeling it's not going to be Hazel, that he might make his final stand against Salem, end up being killed in the process, and it'll be Emerald who ends up saving Oscar and escaping with him, hopefully with Neo in tow, and make a bit of a turnaround. If she is able to save Oscar, I don't think she's going to end up joining our protagonists, but I still do think she would head to Vacuo to try to maybe save Mercury, someone who she does likely consider her family still, as they did seem to have a little bit of a moment as they were looking at each other as Mercury was taking off, so we'll see how that all plays out as well. With Mercury and Tyrion heading to Vacuo, this means we might end up seeing Vacuo by the end of the volume. Technically, we already did with the speech that was going out of RWBY's with Amity Coliseum. We saw Sun and Neptune as they were in Vacuo, but we haven't seen it fully on screen yet. Whether that's going to be the end of this volume, or my guess would be more so in Volume 9, as they would need to render all the new scenery behind the scenes and make the Vacuo models, etc. So I feel like that's going to be something in Volume 9. We may get some hints of it at the end of Volume 8, though. And then, of course, there's the Aesops and Winter. With their emotions brought to the surface thanks to Ren, they're going to have some things to work out between themselves. With Winter and Marrow no longer wanting to be a part of this, Harriet with her anger being the forefront emotion that she has, and then Elm and Vine with whatever it is that they might be going through. Elm, of course, with her rage, and Vine with his maybe jealousy, maybe neutrality. Not exactly sure at this point. Let me know what you guys think on that down in the comments below. But when it comes to their overall plan, I do think that they're going to pick up the bomb, bring it to the whale, and bring it inside, though I don't think they're going to detonate it immediately. They're going to try to make sure that Jean, Yang, and Ren are safe. They're going to try to save Oscar, or at least maybe Winter and Marrow might, whereas Elm, Harriet, and Vine might be a bit more conflicted since they seem the more loyal to Ironwood types, so we'll see how everything plays out with all of the different things that are set up in this episode. Unfortunately, we will have to wait about a month and a half to find out what happens next in the RWBY series, as the series will be going on break until February 6th, 2021, where it will return with episode 8 of Volume 8. Just with the restrictions that the pandemic has put on Rooster Teeth having to work from home, it's going to take a little bit longer to get everything rendered and up to the quality that they want. But for now, let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. What do you think each individual emotion of the Aesops represents? What do you think the colors of the emotions represent? As well as, what do you think of Ren's new awakened semblance, or evolved semblance is probably the better word? How do you think everything's going to play out at the Schnee Manor with Penny now arriving there? Do you think we're going to get to see Klein fight in battle. He's there as the doctor for Nora, and probably going to be able to help Penny to some extent. Do you think that Watts' hacking is going to be able to take full control of Penny at that point? She's going to turn into an enemy at the Schnee Manor. Possibly it might be Penny who ends up killing Willow. I really hope that isn't the case, but it's something we have to consider, as well as the Hound and Cinter. Since they're hunting Penny, they're probably going to show up at the Schnee Manor, and chaos is going to ensue. What do you think's happening in Mantle currently, with the Grimm liquid that is there, and only Fiona and Joanna to defend it? Things really aren't looking too good. And then, of course, there's Crow and Robin, who we didn't see anything of this episode, as well as Watts, who are still likely in prison, though Watts is probably going to be breaking them out. I'm going to guess next episode, and then maybe Crow and Robin will reunite with May, Ruby, Weiss, and Blake. The thought was that maybe Crow and Robin would be going to hunt Tyrion, but now that Tyrion is taking off towards Vacuo, unless Mercury somehow overpowers him and turns the ship around, that's not going to happen. A fight between Crow and Tyrion is not going to happen until Volume 9, maybe Volume 10, or sometime in the future, likely in Vacuo. So that plot point probably not going to happen this volume, but there is a lot of things that could happen. I'm curious to see who's going to come face to face with the Grimm Whale, everything. By this point, I've just been rambling, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you guys want to see more analyses, more theories, there is a lot to come throughout the break, but in the middle of Volume 8, so make sure to subscribe and look forward to that. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.